Hello everybody, welcome back to Read and Reread. I'm Angelia, and today it's time for Friday Reads and a report on my trip to Washington, D.C. It's been a week since I made a video because we've been traveling, and I want to talk about the trip and the books I've been reading and tell you about the incredibly fun and awesome meetup with friends from Booktube that we had while we were in the city. So this may take a minute. Go get a snack, refill your beverage, fluff up the pillows, or simply fast forward to the part that you're most interested in. There's always that. But here we go. All right, so first of all, we went to Washington, D.C., and the occasion was our anniversary. We've been there a number of times over the years. It's one of our favorite places to visit. We love the walkability, we love the metro, we love all of the museums that don't charge entry fees, the whole thing. And so we decided that would be a great place to go for just a few days. It didn't require really intensive planning. And also, we were excited about the fall weather that exists in Washington, D.C. that just isn't happening here. And so for all those reasons, we selected it. And then I was also able to organize a meetup with a couple of good Booktube friends. And so that occurred on Sunday. Hannah from Hannah's Books, and if I will be linking her channel below, but if you are not familiar with Hannah, you are missing out on one of life's great pleasures, so you need to pause this and go subscribe right now. But Hannah lives in the DC area, and she was able to come and meet us. And then my friend Michael Clark, buddy reader extraordinaire, and you see him all over Booktube in the comments as Book of Dust, or on Discord as Caleb Trask. And we've just become good friends this year. So he drove down from Pennsylvania, or up, I don't know, across. I gotta check him out. And we met at the Hirshhorn Museum. Now, the Hirshhorn is celebrating its 50th anniversary, and it had a really great exhibit where they brought out a lot of things that they own, and they paired and grouped them in really interesting combinations representing their collection over the 50 years and art history itself. And so this was really awesome. This picture of us, we are in an installation made by Laurie Anderson, who you might remember from her music. Well, I mean, she's still producing art music. She's a multimedia artist. She kind of had a moment in the 80s with songs like Oh Superman and my personal favorite, Walk the Dog. Maybe I'll link that below too for your listening pleasure. But anyway, it was this giant room. For the floors, the walls, the ceilings are covered with all of this writing and imagery, and then there was music and sounds and some spoken pieces going on. So that was super cool. And then there was this other exhibit, these artists that none of us had ever heard of. Are you familiar with these guys? It's a pair of twins, Brazilian twins, and this was a huge exhibit. It started as graffiti art. That's a collaboration they did with Banksy, but it just went on for rooms and rooms. There was all kinds of multimedia pieces. It's very hard to explain, but I'll put some little bits and things in here playing as I'm talking. So anyway, so we enjoyed all of these exhibits. We went for lunch, and then we went to a bookstore, and it was Capitol Hill Books, which is a used bookstore that has 3 floors in an old house. And so there's books in every nook and cranny. Even in the bathroom, there were political books, which I thought was kind of funny. And you will not believe this is sort of a Booktuber miracle, but out of the 4 people who went into the bookstore, only Hannah actually bought a book. Well, Michael had just gone to a library book sale, I think, just right before, like a day or 2 before, and I don't know, I was just being really careful about putting anything extra in my suitcase. So I bought 1 book on this trip. It is very thin, and I will show it to you in a book haul that's coming up in the coming week. So we didn't buy anything, but we had a great time looking and talking and chatting while we were browsing the store. And then, okay, that took up like almost the whole day, because the museum had so much, and then the bookstore was fun, and we had a lunch in between. I already said all that. So then we said goodbye to Hannah, and Stephen and Michael and I stayed. We walked over to the Folger Theater, and because we had plays to see Romeo and Juliet, and the production of Romeo and Juliet was absolutely stellar. First, we took time to look through the exhibits that are in the Folger Shakespeare Library, the museum area, and they have the wonderful collection of first folios. They have lots of interesting artifacts and pieces about the history of Shakespeare's writing and his life, and then other exhibits that have to do with other documents and manuscripts, and just a lot of interesting things for the bookishly inclined. And then the play, and the play was so good. I wasn't sure what to think because it was an adaptation that modernizes the play, but they actually stuck to they didn't modernize the language. It was the familiar script of Romeo and Juliet, even though some of it was in Spanish with subtitles, because Juliet's family was Puerto Rican. Very timely, and they were the Capulets and the Montagues were political rivals. Juliet's father and Romeo's mother are running for office against each other in a very tight, close race. And everything in this play, there was all these banks of screens, and there was lots of things that were incorporated modern media into contemporary formats, into the periphery of the play. And so things like when Juliet's scrolling and trying to find Romeo through Instagram and TikTok, and when she says, "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo?" Going to go through all the Romeos to try to find the right one. When Romeo purchases the poison, it drops down from a drone in an Amazon bag. Things like that, the modern touches. And then the young pair playing Romeo and Juliet were absolutely outstanding. They captured how absurdly young the couple is, the mood swings, the giddiness, how Romeo just drops his obsession with Rosaline and switches over to Juliet. Just the whole thing, it makes it funnier, cuter, and then ultimately more tragic. So very interesting. It was very well done. I loved it. And we had such a great time watching the play together. But then parting is always such sweet sorrow. And so we said goodbye to Michael so he could drive home. That was just such an excellent day, spending time with my friends that I never would have met if I wasn't on Booktube. But what a joy. And so, but our vacation then continued, and we saw a lot of really great exhibits. If you're in DC anytime soon, at the National Portrait Gallery, there are some really good exhibitions of book lover interest, including one about James Baldwin and one about women in Paris in the early part of the 20th century. And it is a show. There was a wonderful coffee table book about this show that I really coveted in the gift shop, but it was this huge, heavy thing. So I might have to look into ordering it. Just this amazing collection of intelligent, creative, unconventional women that all lived in Paris during this period of time. And there were just so many people portrayed in this exhibit that I was just like, oh yeah, oh I love her, oh that's what she looks like, and I couldn't stop and read every piece of every information because we had a lot of museum to cover. So I just might need that book so that I can learn more about all those extraordinary women. The James Baldwin exhibit too was wonderful photography about his life. It was about Baldwin and all of his friends, his famous friends, and the circle that he was in. And anyway, and then it was interesting to see the presidential portraits as well, and just how they reflect changing artistic trends and everything through the decades. What else? We went to the botanical gardens, which I have been to DC a million times, and I've never gone to the U.S. Botanic Gardens. That was one of our favorite things of all the places we visited. It was so It was the best botanic garden I've ever been to. We also went to, what else did we do? Oh, we went to Library of Congress, which I've been to before. It's so beautiful, but I did that again. And I'm sure I'm leaving things out. I'm leaving out the parts where we walk around in neighborhoods and go out to eat and stuff like that. But it was a really great trip. And then on the last night that we were there, we didn't stumble into this rally. We heard about the rally the day before the trip, that Kamala Harris was going to have this rally in DC while we were there, and we went. And what a crowd it was! It was a massive crowd. The permit was originally for like 6,000 or something, and then it ended up being 75,000 people estimated. And we were kind of in the, I guess it was like the overflow. We could see everything, we could hear everything, and we could see it on the big screens. We could not see her in person. We were too far away. We were closer to the monument. But the crowd energy was fantastic. The speech was excellent. And it was so friendly and peaceful. There was no chaos. I could hear off in the distance some protesters, like some faraway kettlebells, but it was drowned out by the music and the good vibes. And then when it ended, everyone just left in a peaceful fashion. There was this dude. Okay, I thought I was a hardcore reader. Check out this dude was reading a book in the crowd before the speech. And I thought of Isaac from Heartstopper, who just has a book all the time, no matter what. And so props to you, sir, for having your book on hand to, to fill up the time before the speech started. Okay, so that is a very rapid fire encapsulation of my trip. It was just a lot of fun. If you ever get a chance to meet the people you've gotten to know on BookTube in person, seize the opportunity, because it is such a great time to talk face to face with those friends that you have been messaging and commenting with, and it's really great. All right, we must move on to the books. And if you're just now joining me because you skipped all of my trip travelogue, welcome back. We're going to talk about the books now, and there's quite a stack. All right, so first of all, whoops, I did finish The Haunting of Hill House right before the trip. This was the perfect October book for me. I'm not really, I mean, occasionally read horror, but I really don't like anything too over the top, gory, hardcore horror kind of deal. I prefer something more creepy, sinister. It could be supernatural. It could be psychological. This fit all the bills. I love Shirley Jackson. I have read, well, here's what I've read. All I've read is The Lottery, The Haunting of Hill House, and We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Love them all. So I'm so glad there's more in this book for me to explore. But this was so strange. If you've never read it and you aren't really a horror reader, don't worry. If you like anything puzzling, a little scary, a little bizarre, it's really more about the characters. Some weird things happen in this house, but it's really about the characters. So they go to this house. There is a guy who wants to explore whether or not it's actually haunted. He's some sort of anthropologist. He assembles this group. He doesn't get a lot of takers, but he ends up with a group with two young women, both of whom have reasons to not want to be where they were and instead take up this offer to spend the summer in this bizarre, creepy house. And then a young man who is part of the family will eventually inherit the house, and his aunt, I think she just wants to get him out of her hair for a while as well, because he's problematic in some vague ways that are never really explained. So these four people are in the house. Later on, the doctor's wife and her assistant, or whatever he is to her, shows up as well. And she is like old school. It's like she got dropped in out of a Victorian novel about seances. She's got the the planchette, and she's all about documenting. I mean, she's just very old school about paranormal events, and she has a whole different take and feel about the house than everybody else does. Lots of weird things happen. Are they real? Are they in one particular character's mind? Is it haunted? Is she manifesting things, or is the house responding to her? There are lots of questions about the relationships that begin to emerge amongst the characters. I'm not going to give anything else away, but it's wonderful, and it is one with lots of things to discuss, lots of multiple possible interpretations right up to the very end. So satisfying, not for people who need to know exactly the reasons why everything happened, because you're not going to get it. But for those of us who like ambiguous and unexplained and lots of tantalizing possibilities, it's fabulous. And it just has so much, it just really captures a lot of that mid-century tension about women's roles, sexuality. There's a lot going on that's specific to the time period, but that is timeless enough to keep thinking about. The other book that I finished was The Warden by Anthony Trollope, but I haven't finished the discussion of the second half of the book. We are scheduled to talk about that today. Sonya and I, oh, I forgot. That was a remote control. This was a buddy read with Michael. This was a buddy read with Sonya from Enthusiastic Reader, but we're not finished talking about it, so I'm not going to talk about it either. But I did love The Warden, and I am going to pursue book 2, which is called Barchester Towers, I believe. Yes, I'm going to get Barchester Towers. All right, then also, let's see. I read The Road to Dalton by Shannon Bowring. There's a sequel to this book, and I heard that she's writing a third. I read this mostly on the airplane, and then by the time we got there, I realized I was going to run out of book on the trip. And remember, I was going to bring this, and it got cut for space because I had to fit in the heating pad, which we both used every day, so it was a good call. But it got really crowded in my suitcase. So I just read this, and I read some odds and ends online, and a little bit out of a book I picked up that, well, I'm not going to show it to you because it's going to be in the hall, but it's a small, slender book of poetry. That's all I'll tell you. Read a little bit of that. I read the little flyers that come from the museums. I read every little thing in a couple of magazines to last me through the rest of the trip and on the way home. But The Road to Dalton, it takes place in a small town in Maine. It's about several people that live there. There are various challenges. It's set in about 1990, and I have to tell you at this point that I didn't know that this book was going to be deeply, deeply, deeply sad, and a lot of it about grief and anger, and a trigger warning about suicide. I thought that this was not a cozy book, so that's not really my vibe, but I thought it was going to be a little cozier than what I got. It was actually quite dark and emotional, but it was very good. It was very troubled and sad, and that's not exactly what I thought I was picking out for the trip. I thought it was going to be a little more like eccentric people and their relationships, and I guess that's in there, but then there's like a lot of angst. There's just all the things I thought I was getting, but then it was darker. But when I got to the end, when I got to about the last 30 pages, that's when things it got so good that I started wanting to read the second book. So I'm ending on an endorsement. And it's not a not endorsement that it was sad and something terrible happened. I just didn't see it coming, and it kind of walloped me when I was kind of expecting something different. All right, I did begin this just yesterday. I read only the first story, and I decided I'm just going to read a story a day alongside everything else I'm reading from Never Whistle at Night, an Indigenous dark fiction anthology. So it originally was in my ideas for November as Indigenous fiction, and then it moved to October for spooky, and now it's kind of come back to November because I didn't quite get to it until the very last day of October. So I only have read the first story. I have nothing yet to report. All right, also yesterday, it never ends, does it? I read A Streetcar Named Desire. I didn't know I was going to read the whole thing. And here's that cover that I don't like, but I picked it up yesterday. I made my tea. It was tea time, and I read a story. And then I said, you know, this is coming up in our discussion for the banned books at the library in November. And so I'm just going to go ahead and take a look. And I read half the play. And then in the evening, I read the rest of the play. So it was a reread. I read it a couple of times. I know I read it first in high school. And you know what I remember, I'm going to be really careful because I don't want to give spoilers, but there's a key event in this play. It's like the main thing that everything builds up to. That's almost at the end of the play. And it has to do with an altercation between two characters. And that event was presented so much differently to me as a teenager than how it really is. And I knew how it really was because I read it subsequently, but I was just thinking about that when I reread it and how violence gets downplayed and explained off and presented in sanitized packages sometimes for certain audiences. And I don't know if a teenager reading this for the first time today would fall for the sanitized version of what was actually happening in that scene. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give away what happens. But it was rewarding to read it again. And I'd like to see not necessarily the movie, but I want to see one of the stagings of the play with all the scenes intact, because there's also a segment of the play that explains, okay, I haven't even said what this is about, but in case you've never read it, it's about, there's two sisters, Blanche and Stella, from Louisiana. They grew up they had some kind of a palatial family home, and Stella now lives in New Orleans with her husband, Stanley, who is, he's very coarse, he's very blunt, he's very, apparently pretty hot. Stella is in love with him even though he sometimes gets drunk and violent. And her sister Blanche comes to say, who has a lot of genteel airs. She wants to present herself in a certain way as a Southern lady. She finds Stanley completely appalling and gross. And they immediately butt heads in this tiny apartment. And right from the start, we can tell that Blanche is unstable. We don't really know why. And gradually we learn more about her. One thing that got cut from early productions, and I think even the famous movie, was when she reveals what happened in her very early young marriage to her husband and her. What happens in that marriage that results in that husband's death. And it's really important in the story. And that's another thing that got cut and censored and washed out. And I think that'll come up in our discussion of it as a banned book. But anyway, it's a fast read. It's great for Shorty September. This is kind of my soft launch into a study of 20th and 20th century drama that I was kind of for 2025, but it's starting early because I read this and there's something else in the works for December. So stay tuned. But I really enjoyed this, and I need to find a production of it to enjoy watching as well. Also, but wait, there's more. Today is the day to begin reading All Yours by Claudia Pineiro. This is a group read with a astonishingly fantastic group of women on Voxer, and we're supposed to start this today, so that's what I'm going to do. And then we will be discussing it, and that's all I have to say about it because I haven't started. I'm going to pair that up with one of these two books. Now, my organizational voice says, well, you should pair that with one of your nonfiction books because it's Nonfiction November. And my chaotic voice says, you should just read anything that looks good in the pile. So I have a book from my 10 Before the End that I'm thinking about starting today, Colored Television by Danzy Senza. But then I have my nonfiction book that the one that's jumping out at me to start is Also a Poet by Ada Calhoun. What seems to be attracting me here? What's up with I'm like a butterfly being drawn to the pink and red and orange. So today I will be starting this and one of those. and read a short story from Never Whistle at Night. Okay, whew, there it is. What I read, where I went, what I saw, who I met, what I did, and what is coming up next. How about you? What's going on? What are you going to read this weekend? Let me know. Coming up in the week ahead, there's a certain tag I want to attend to, and also I have a book haul. So I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.